My name is Vicki Shapiro. Many of you out there look familiar to me, and I know we've spoken before in past EAN, ESD meetings. And so I apologize in advance if any of this is repetitive for you, but I do want to quickly go through who we are and what our mission is and why we do the work that we do. The programs that we offer to high school students and schools, and also a little bit about our results in 2024, in part with the tremendous help that we received from members of Elders Action Network. And then finally, how you can get involved and help this year if you would like to do that. So I'm going to jump in. We see high school voter registration as a path to universal voter registration. As you probably hear every election cycle, there are organizations that are running around trying to register people who are not yet registered. And our goal is to essentially take care of that in high school by having twice a year, every year, voter registration drives in every high school in the country. That is really our vision, is to have a population level impact for the entire country. And data really guides our work in a number of respects. Most importantly, the reason high school voter registration is needed is that there is a persistent gap in voter registration rates among the youngest voters, 18 and 19-year-olds, and the oldest voters. In general, under 35% of 18 and 19-year-olds are registered to vote in the midterm elections, and roughly 45 this year. The tally came up to about 47.5% of 18 and 19-year-olds were registered for presidential elections, and the voter registration rate for those over 45 is roughly 70%. So there's this persistent gap in voter registration rates that we are trying to address. What this gap means is that we've got about 4 to 5 million missing voters in every national election. And you might all be thinking, well, isn't voter registration done at the DMV these days with motor voter laws, and kids are getting registered to vote at the DMV? But obviously, as a result of the rates that I just talked to you about, that's not happening. And part of the problem is that a lot of young people these days are not getting driver's licenses at all. That's roughly 40% don't get their driver's licenses before they turn 21. And without having a driver's license, it makes it much harder to use online voter registration, which is offered, I think, in about 42 states now. Programs that are targeted at college students are reaching at most only 60% of the electorate, because roughly 40% are not going on to college after high school. And democracy groups tend not to address up and coming voters. They tend to focus much more on higher propensity voters, while civics education groups aren't incorporating voter registration into their curricula, in part because of the politicization of issues like voter registration over the course of the last decade. Let's see. Well, there we go. Whoops, I went backwards. The fact that virtually every high school student is old enough to register before they graduate from high school means that voter registration really should be taking place while high school students are still a captive audience, and where high schools have an opportunity to incorporate voter registration into their civics education curricula. Now, as Therese was saying, a lot of schools are no longer teaching civics, and part of our goal is to, reintroduce civics curricula into schools and give students a real hands-on experiential learning about democracy by helping to organize and participate in voter registration drives. You can find your state on this map and see what the voter registration age is in your state. Being able to register to vote at 16, as in states like Washington and Florida, doesn't mean that students can vote when they're 16. They still have to wait until they're 18, but they have the states that offer students at least a year in which to register before the first election in which they can vote, which is roughly for 70% of teens across the country, means that there is a real on-ramp to democracy in those states. There is an opportunity and time to get students registered to vote before their first election. For roughly the other remaining 30%, still the vast majority of them can register to vote before the first election in which they're eligible. Even in Texas, where the voter registration age is 17 years and 10 months old, a date that every teen has on their calendar. Still, most students are 17 years and 10 months old before they graduate from high school. And many of you have also seen this chart before. One of the reasons that we're so focused on high school voter registration is that we know that when people are registered, they do tend to turn out in numbers similar to older Americans. We do not yet have the statistics for 2024, and given cuts in the federal government and the Census Bureau, we don't know when we're going to have the data from 2024. But we expect that it will come in line with much of the historical data, which shows that at least 75% of registered 18 to 24-year-olds vote once they are actually registered. So the number that you frequently hear in the media, which is that roughly half of young people turn out, is focused on the total population of both registered and unregistered young people. This graphic is looking only at those who are registered. So it shows that when they register, they do turn out, especially in presidential elections. I should say the turnout rate in midterm elections, which I know is the next national election that we have coming up, is roughly 2/3. So about 67% of young registered voters turn out in midterms. And this is really all just to say that we believe that we're more than a voter registration organization. The Civic Center is really trying to fill a critical gap in the work to strengthen our democracy by building a larger and more representative electorate. So some of the things that we like to stress about our programs and what we think high school voter registration is, we focus on student-led, adult-supported voter registration drives so that students have the opportunity to be engaged and involved in their democracy, but with the support of an adult, which typically means an educator in their school who is acting as a faculty advisor for their voter registration drive. We encourage schools to have voter registration drives twice a year, every year. It's not, again, something that happens only during national election cycles, which means that we would be missing out on reaching a number of students who are going to graduate every year and become harder to miss, become harder to reach. And again, I talked about this being a really systemic solution to low voter registration rates among young people. And again, offering a hands-on teaching experience for students, which we believe really could be a bulwark against authoritarianism and an opportunity for students to see democracy in action and hopefully see that their government responds to their needs when they are more involved in their democracy. What high school voter registration is not. It's not just setting up a lunch table in the lunchroom that is sporadic and static in that it waits for students to come to them. Instead, we are more proactive in encouraging students to be involved in organizing a voter registration drive and in encouraging their peers to register to vote. It is not just handing out forms to students and hoping that they'll take them home and fill them in and send them out. It's being actively engaged with students as they register to vote, many of them online. And it's not for short-term political gain. We're really looking at building a long-term systemic change to voter registration in our country, which I like to think doesn't exist already because originally the voter registration and voting age was 21. And so, there was really no reason to have voter registration in high school, but it has been decades since the voting age was lowered to 18. And it has been over a decade since the voting registration age has been lowered to 16, now in about 18 states. And we're trying to add those all the time. And so this really is something that should be happening in high schools to ensure a close to universal voter registration. So again, I mentioned what we focus on are student-led drives. These are peer-to-peer efforts where students are encouraging their friends and their peers to register to vote. And we see that as the most effective model, as opposed to having outside organizations go into schools and try to register students who do not have an existing relationship, with that organization. This does not mean that there isn't a role to play for outside groups, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But first, I wanted to tell you a little bit about our results in 2024. I mentioned that data really drives a lot of our work, and we do use research and data to help inform us about voter registration rates in various states and in school districts within those states, which varies widely. Even in a single state, and I like to think about New York State in particular, has extremely wide disparities between the 18, 19-year-old voter registration rates, for example, in New York City versus those rates in upstate New York, which in New York City, I think it's in single digits. Whereas upstate, you've got a couple of counties that are plus 90%. So we need to use that data to know, what the starting point is. We also use that data to motivate students and educators in districts that have low voter registration rates. And then we also use it for accountability, both for ourselves and for districts that have taken on the mission of registering their students to vote. So data and building out our data model is a lot of what we focused on in 2024. What it enabled us to see was that versus the last federal election cycle, we had about a 350% increase in the number of high schools holding drives through our programs. In 2024, we had drives in high schools in 35 states and Washington, D.C., and we trained nearly 2,000 students and educators through a combination of our online workshops and in-person trainings that we held in several states across the country, including Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Arizona, and California. If you're wondering, we have had our model tested 3 times by an academic who determined that after only a single cycle of voter registration drives in a district, so just holding a single high school voter registration drive in a district generated a 6 percentage point increase in the 18-year-old voter registration rate. And so imagine doing this year in and year out, twice a year in every district, how quickly we would be able to reach parity with the voter registration rates of older Americans. And also we were able in 2024 to decrease the cost of the cost that we spent on voter registration drives in each school by about 35%. I think that is in part because after getting into a school and training an educator and their students once, repeating that process costs much less. We don't have the essentially acquisition cost of getting that school into our program. And so it's a much less expensive program to operate year over year once we have schools that are repeating our program. In terms of postcards, first, I just want to say a heartfelt thank you to all of you out there who signed up for a postcard campaign and sent postcards to young people and to parents of young people in Pennsylvania and Arizona. Thank you so very much. We had about a total, and I of course, would be remiss if I didn't thank Therese herself for managing and administering the whole thing. Without her, it would not have been possible. And we are so extremely grateful for all of the hours and hours that she put in to administer that program for us. We had about 500 volunteers who sent postcards. I know many of them were through Elders Action Network, so thank you so much for that. Those volunteers sent about 50,000 postcards just to Pennsylvania and about another 5,000 to Arizona. In terms of Pennsylvania, the registration rate among 18-year-olds in Pennsylvania was about 11 percentage points higher than the national average. The national average was about 47.5%. And in Pennsylvania, it was 58.5%, as you can see on this chart, which also breaks down 18-year-old voter registration rate by the highest, by the most populous counties plus Philadelphia. And we know from a past study that sending postcards to parents of teens, which were the targets of most of our postcards in this campaign, along with other organizing, for example, texting those same people, results in at least a 1 percentage point increase overall in the voter registration rate in the area where the postcards were sent. So we don't know exactly what the impact was, specifically of the postcards that were sent, but we know that that the voter registration rates among 18-year-olds in Pennsylvania was higher than the national average. And I like to think that we all had a lot to do with that. So thank you. One thing that I had mentioned earlier was the role for outside organizations in our work. And that's the main reason why I wanted to show you this slide, was to highlight some of the partnerships that we have developed. These are not at all exclusive partnerships. These are just organizations that we have worked with in various places that already have existing relationships with schools in their communities. And it makes it much more efficient for us to get our programming into those schools. Also in places like New Hampshire, which is the only state in the country where you have to register to vote in person. It is really hard for students to organize voter registration drives because they have to have a registrar come to their school to enable that. And that has made our relationship with Open Democracy in New Hampshire really key to our success in that state. And so I just wanted to show that there are a variety of models out there, but we believe that a model in which the Civic Center can provide training, resources, materials, and support at a national level with a grassroots organization that is providing support, relationships, organization capacity on the ground is a really great partnership and makes our work really efficient. So to the extent, I know Therese is going to talk about this a little bit more, but to the extent any of you have relationships with organizations like that, then we'd love to speak with you about the possibility of creating that type of partnership. Okay, I want to go through the rest of this quickly. I know I'm using up lots of my time. So I just wanted to say, we, as I said, we focus on having voter registration drives in high schools twice a year, every year. And this is a perfect example of why, because there's really no off year. States and localities have elections every year. And so pretending that we only register people to vote every 2 years or every 4 years doesn't make a lot of sense, and it misses a lot of potential voters. So just for an example, here on the left is an example of some of the elections that are happening in states in 2025. And of course, the 2026 midterms really are right around the corner. And if we don't register to vote those students who are graduating from high school this year in 2025, we're going to possibly never have another opportunity to register them before the 2026 midterms. So it's important that we keep our work going throughout the year, every year. And to do that, we have 2 campaigns annually, one in the fall, High School Voter Registration Week, and one that is going on now, which is called Cap, Gown, and Ballot, where our focus really is on ensuring that every senior is given an opportunity to register to vote before they graduate. To do that, what we do is we train students and educators through online training sessions, just like this one, in how to organize a voter registration drive in their school. We provide materials in a handy dandy box. I had one sitting around here, but now I don't know what I did with it. Called Democracy in a Box, that includes all of the materials that the students need to put on a voter registration drive in their school: stickers, candy, forms, information about voter registration rules in their states, clipboards, pens, all of that kind of fun stuff. And then, as I mentioned, we provide school district level data about 18-year-old voter registration rates so that schools can see where they are versus other districts in their state, perhaps, and get a sense of how far they have to go. So we are now into Cap, Gown, and Ballot. We are offering those workshops, those online workshops, to students and educators roughly 2 to 3 times per week, generally in the afternoon, 5, 6, or 7 p.m. Eastern time. We are focusing, based on our results last year, we're focusing heavily on developing relationships with educators. The educators seem to be the people in the schools who know best who the students are who are likely to want to get involved in voter registration drives, or maybe the educators are already faculty advisors for a club, like an environmental club that might want to sponsor a voter registration drive. So we are offering several things. We've got student incentives of $150 gift card to up to 3 students in a school who will be drive leaders. We also, by the way, are offering $500 stipends to educators who go through our educator training program. And we have an educator toolkit on our website that has been revised this year in a number of ways. I'll get to that in just a minute. We are also offering one-on-one educator meetings with one of our staff people, our manager of education development. She will meet with educators for 15 to 30 minutes to answer questions that they have about helping their students organize voter registration drives. We're also offering custom district and school level trainings for groups that have a critical mass of people and want to do that. And there's a lot more information about all of that on our educator training page on our website. So how can you help? Really, the main thing is spreading the word, increasing awareness, both about high school voter registration, about the voter registration age in your state, and about the free and nonpartisan workshops that we offer. So we have a do-it-yourself supporter toolkit available on our website, which is theciviccenter.org. And there's a volunteer tab, and under that volunteer tab, you will find all the information that I'm about to provide to you. The supporter toolkit has been updated for Cap, Gown, and Ballot. So the picture of the one that's up here is from last fall. It has been updated since then. And I think the most important way that it's been updated is that it makes very clear where you can find sample email messages and sample text messages to send to people in your networks who may be educators, former educators, students. Maybe you have a grandchild, a niece, a nephew who is in high school, or maybe a niece or nephew who has high school students themselves. What we've done is put together sample email messages that are in this DIY supporter toolkit. We have more sample email messages that are customized by audience. So for example, if you know a principal at your local high school, or maybe you know the principal from the high school that you went to, then we have sample email messages that are customized for you to send out sharing information about the Civic Center and our programs. And I'm going to stress this again in a minute, but I do want to say all of our programs are completely free for every student, every educator in the country at any high school. We also, if you have a grandchild who's being homeschooled, it's perfectly fine for them to go through our program as well. Maybe they want to do a voter registration drive, for their sports team or for another club that isn't within their high school. But any high school student, high school educator, or high school administrator in the country is welcome to come to our programs. And again, it's absolutely free. So I mentioned that we have new educator toolkits on our website. The educator toolkits, these are in the educator tab of our website, and they include information for educators about how to encourage their students to organize drives, tasks for students to do. The goal here really is to incorporate voter registration into an existing civics curricula. And we have worksheets for the educators to use to keep track of their students' drives to help them stay on track. The educator toolkits are customized for certain states, and those states are listed here. We've included New Jersey and Virginia this year, in part because they both have statewide elections in 2025.
Carrie, do you think it'd be helpful if I took the medicine at night instead of taking it?
Sorry, I don't know if that's a
Please
question.
Mute yourself if you are the source of that sound, please.
Send it.
So you can see the states that we have custom toolkits for here. And if you're not in one of those states and you know an educator who you want to send an educator toolkit to, we do have a generic version that identifies the information and where the information that the educator may need. For example, what is the voter registration age in my state? And provide sources to find that information for them so that they can essentially create their own toolkit. And Therese is going to talk more about this, but just very quickly, a few things to think about in doing outreach. I already mentioned thinking about your friends, family, and networks and how they might be connected to high schools. Hosting a voter registration drive is a terrific activity for any type of school club. And as well as folks who you may know who are in PTA, they're great resources in terms of being able to identify educators who might be interested in coming to one of our workshops. Again, I mentioned that our programs are
For some reason,
free.
I can't hear you.
And we do have more information about the Civic Center that is geared toward questions that volunteers might have about us. So we have a volunteer FAQ on our website under the volunteer tab. Finally, because all of our programs are free, we depend on donations from people like you to make our work possible. And these are just some examples of the way that we make use of those donations. Democracy in a Box, which I mentioned, costs us about $100 per school. The student gift cards I mentioned worked beautifully for High School Voter Registration Week back in the fall of 2024. And we are reprising that program for Cap, Gown, and Ballot this year. And as I mentioned, once we get our programs into a school, having that school participate again the following year is much less expensive. And so it really makes your donations go far. Finally, we are a nonpartisan project of a 501c3 organization, and so your donations are tax deductible. I did want to mention, I know I heard there's at least one lawyer among you. This isn't just for lawyers, but it might be most interesting to lawyers. Our founder, Laura Brill, is going to be having a voting rights discussion with Pam Carlin, who is a law professor at Stanford Law School, on March 27th. It's going to be in San Francisco, but there is a virtual opportunity So if you're in the San Francisco area and you're interested in attending, terrific. If you're not in that area and you're interested in attending, you can do so virtually. You can sign up for the program on our website. And for lawyers in California, we are providing MCLE credit. If you're outside California, I don't know if there's a way of getting continuing legal education credit through your state bar association. By the way, you can see more information about this on our events page on our website. So if you go to our website, there's a tab called events, where also all of our workshops are listed. So thank you so much. Thanks again so much to Therese and to all of you for making for inviting me back. I greatly appreciate it and hope I didn't go over time.
Thank you. It's just excellent. And yes, I am